Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@usaprepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
All set, cocked, locked. Here we go. Dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being with us today. Jason is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. Welcome, Guineith.
Hello, Vincent. How are you this morning?
Really well. Guineith, I had a question to ask you before, or an item to discuss with you before we start on the items on your list. And I'm just wondering, is Australia spiraling down into the abyss the way the United States is? And here's why I'm saying this. So people that I see in public are out of control. And I've been talking about this, me first, the lack of etiquette, the lack of manners. And so what does this have to do with preparedness? Well, I think that our class needs to know that these things are going on and they're getting worse by the minute so that you can stay out of the way of it. In Lakewood, Colorado, there was an elementary school. And on that elementary school grounds, there was a baseball game. 7-year-olds were playing. 7, S-E-V-E-N. 7-year-olds were playing on the ball field. The umpire was a 13-year-old. And the umpire calls an out-of-order batter. So one guy was batting out of order. The next thing that happens is that mothers and fathers run onto the field and have a slugfest. A whole bunch of them.
You've got to be kidding me.
No. This is not just, one guy pushing around another guy. It's a whole group of separate fights going on the ball field with these alleged adults, alleged parents of these boys playing baseball, 7-year-olds. One was hurt seriously. The police are trying to figure out who these people were that were fighting. This is the kind of stuff that's going on. Is everybody off their meds? Is everybody on their meds? Is everybody addicted to drugs, alcohol? Are they stressed out? Did they all lose their jobs? Are they all playing under a blanket of microwave radiation? What is going on where people can't even go to a ball game? And what if that 13-year-old umpire made a mistake? What if? Now, I don't know if he did or didn't, but what if he did? So what? What does this really mean? How important is this? This is a ball game.
It doesn't really matter.
Yeah. So I was just wondering, and the reason I mentioned this is I was talking with Jason, and I thought that we, USA Prepares, is the only broadcast that I know of and that has a regular, ongoing, out-of-continent correspondent, such as you. You're the only one who's on radio regularly, I'm talking about every week, regularly for years, who was out of the continent, the United States of America, because we originate in the United States. We're the only ones. Now there are broadcasts who, from time to time have people from outside the country with, news items, for example, but not on a regular, ongoing basis. And certainly no one who lives off the grid. So we are absolutely, positively unique in that world. So I wanted to thank you and let you know that that is the case. I believed it was the case. I believed it for quite some time, well over a year, actually a couple of years. I believed it was the case, and it is the case. So thank you for that, Gwyneth. So is Australia, are you experiencing this nonsense, this level of stupidity? Has it progressed across the globe?
I'll tell you what, our little hamlet up the road is going down the toilet slowly but surely because they allow, my son doesn't go to the local high school anymore because they're teaching all the little boys that they can decide whether they're boys or girls. And, I mean, you know, and the girls can decide whether they want to be boys or girls. And I decided that this was not acceptable and that, that I was going to pull him out of the school. I requested that they remove his name from the school rolls, that he would not be, I did not consent to him attending the school. He has since passed school leaving age, but when I did this, he was just under school leaving age. And they have decided that they are not going to pull his name from the school roll. And there's nothing I can do about it. So I still get absentee messages from the school saying that he's absent from his classes. And he's actually now over the school leaving age, so he's no longer legally required to attend classes. But they will not remove his name from the school roll. And there's nothing I can do about it. And I will not have him attending that school because of the sexual weirdness that they have and the fact that they were trying to work with child protection to entrap us for an extended period of time. And, so he, oh my gosh. Is that the sort of thing you're talking about, Vincent?
I'm talking about, yes, I'm talking about that. I'm talking about people who go shopping and they are, this is very
the closer into civilization you get, the bigger the town you get into. Like you go down the road, and there's the next biggest town, which has got about 120,000 people living in it. Okay, that place is even worse.
Right.
And then you go to Melbourne, and that place is absolutely, it's like, in Australia we have a saying called that S blank blank T, crazy. That's the saying that we have in this country. But you can look online for photographs of Melbourne homeless people and the Flinders Street railway station, which is like the big station, like our grand central station of our state capital city, has apparently been taken over by homeless people. And I haven't seen this with my eyes. I've seen photos of it, but I'm lost for words. Apparently the CBD is being taken over by homeless people of Melbourne, which is our state capital.
Well, I don't know anybody who wants to be homeless. It's a terrible situation. But I can tell you this, that if someone's homeless, they have no place to relieve themselves. There's no place to relieve themselves. And stores don't want homeless people coming in. Businesses don't want homeless people coming in, just to use the bathroom. McDonald's, in some McDonald's, they require a purchase. So they have a lock on the door of the bathrooms so that, you key in the number code, the combination to get into the bathroom at some McDonald's, because the code is on the receipt that you get when you buy something. So if you've got to go and you're homeless and you don't have any money and you go into McDonald's, you might find the doors locked to the bathroom. Now that was a given for as long as I can remember, that if you needed to use the bathroom, you could go into McDonald's and go. It sure would be nice if you bought something, okay? But they didn't discriminate against whether you bought something or not to use the bathroom. It was just, try not to leave a mess when you're in there. But, pick up after yourself, that kind of thing. Leave it clean. That's what everybody expected, McDonald's as well as everybody else. But it seems to me that the homelessness is a really big problem, and we're not looking at it properly. We're not seeing that this is a symptom of the economy. This is a symptom of the drug abuse. This is a symptom of alcoholism. This is a fallout of drug abuse, fallout of alcoholism, fallout of the prison system, fallout of not having productive, meaningful work. If people don't have meaning in their lives, what do they do? They kind of drop out, unless they're really wealthy to begin with and spend down that wealth. They become homeless. And then they become a blight on the city, because where are they going to relieve themselves? Wherever they are. And how do they wash up? And they spread disease. It's awful. It's awful. And the government corporations are doing a miserable, miserable job. They're doing a miserable job of making it more conducive to hire people, making it more conducive to educate people, making it more conducive for people to want to go to work, because people are taxed into oblivion. And we're working ourselves to death, and we're getting less. The bottom line is about 25% of the people feel that they are worse off now than they were before the Great Recession. Worse off. But yet, if you watch the news, the mainstream lies, things are rosy and bright. Unemployment is down. Employment is up. Salaries are up, but not for us. Only
not
for
around here. I'll tell you how it is here. The crazy, crazy, crazy situation that we have here in Australia. Okay? If you go online and you look up the poverty line for Australia, you'll see that if the authorities consider that you are bringing in less than $800 a week before tax, okay, then you are under the poverty line. Now, what that translates to, of that $800 before tax, if you're a wage earner, you will not see, you might see $500 of that money, okay? And you try getting a rental property for under $250 a week, and good luck to you. Try getting a job that pays more than $800 a week, and good luck to you, because they're pretty thin on the ground. Okay? So you've got an $800 a week job, and that's technically poverty level wages. Okay? And you're lucky if you have that. You're only going to see $500 of that, because we have a pay-as-you-go tax system here for income tax. And I can hear music.
Yeah, we'll be right back. Guineith Isaacs staying up late in Australia to be with us. We'll be right back. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. She lives off the grid, and she's an author. Guineith, in the United States, the average rent for an apartment is $1,405 a month, $1,405 per month.
Wow.
The lowest rent for in 50 major cities, the lowest cost rent for a one-bedroom apartment, one bedroom, in the United States, the lowest cost is Wichita, Kansas, $470, Cleveland, Ohio, $525, Detroit, Michigan, $550, Tucson, Arizona, $560, El Paso, Texas, $560, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, $650, St. Louis, Missouri, just 3 hours from where we are, $700, Albuquerque, New Mexico, $715. Those are the lowest cost cities for a one-bedroom apartment in the United States. That's the lowest. The average is $1,405 per month. Then the average income in the United States is, let's say it this way. According to the internet, if you want to be middle class, you will need to earn between $40,500 and $122,000 a year. $40,500 to $122,000 to be middle class. If you make less than $39,500, you are considered the lower or less. $39,500 or less, you are in the lower income bracket. And according to the internet, what is a good average salary in the United States? Well, that would be $150,000 a year. That would be a good average salary. And that's more than 3 times what the median salary is for 2010.
Wow.
2010. So we're in a lot of trouble because I know a lot of people that don't make $49,000. I know a lot of people who don't make a lot more who don't make $150,000. But I do know some that make $150,000, and they think they don't have enough money. Now, in Australia, my understanding is that the reasons for this inequality and poverty in Australia is education, housing, health, and the cost of services. Does that make sense to you, or do you think there are other reasons? Or do you think it's...
Well, I'll tell you what's been coming out in the Herald Sun, which is the main Melbourne newspaper, or one of the main Melbourne newspapers. Okay. The Herald Sun is owned by News Corporation. Just a bit of so that you know the backstory there. It's one of Rupert's rags, and owned by Rupert Murdoch or his organisation. And but what the Herald Sun was saying was that Melbourne's real estate prices for a 2-bedroom terrace house in Melbourne, the average sale price for a 2-bedroom terrace house that's a non-detached house, okay, that's what you would call in the United States probably a row house. You know, they sit right next to each other all down the road. $1 million or thereabouts. You just about cannot get a terraced house in a suburb for less than $1 million. That is a really, really big problem because, you've got to name the income that you're going to have to be able to afford that $1 million house, which is, you would think $1 million house would have like 10 acres of land, a swimming pool, an indoor riding arena, stables, whatever, wouldn't you?
I'm
Really?
I'm stuck
That's
for
like
words.
A $1 million house.
Gwyneth, in 1980 or maybe 1981, I bought one of those as a investment property, and I paid $27,000.
Yeah.
That's 27,000 for one of those row houses that you're talking about. Now, the one that I bought was about 13 feet wide. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
What?
That's the thought.
$1 million. We'll be right back. So, Gwyneth, $1 million. What's causing that? Is there so little land that's available to build on? Is the cost of building materials so high? Are there so many people that want to move to Australia? What is causing these row houses, as we call them in the United States, to be so expensive? I don't get it.
Well, what the Herald Sun was reporting in its newspaper, its print edition, by the way, when I go into town, I actually buy a print edition of the Herald Sun. Okay? So, because there's things you'll read in a print newspaper that you will never, ever read online. Okay. So I recommend that people continue to buy print newspapers because they have to tell you what they're doing. And often they will put it in a print newspaper. What the Herald Sun was telling was that criminal cartels are buying up these row houses and they are using them as a place to park their money. That's not me. That was published in the Herald Sun. And when I read that last week, my jaw dropped to the floor because Melbourne has always been a hotbed of crime. Going back, you can go back 100 years, and it's always been, it's always had this thing of being kind of a magnet for criminal organisations to operate in. And apparently that hasn't changed, and criminal cartels are basically using the Melbourne real estate market at least for money laundering, basically. So they buy these houses and they park their money there and they might hold them for 2, 3, 5 years and they sell them. And apparently
that sounds like
that's what's keeping the Melbourne property market afloat.
And as you, before you just started describing that, I was thinking this is money laundering at a great way to do it, because all you have to do is literally keep it for a few years, and then you get new money. And it sounds like you don't have to make very many purchases to have many millions of dollars laundered. You don't have to go to Las Vegas. And by the way, let me just mention this. There are a number of coin dealers, and I don't know what it is. But coin dealers whom I've met seem to be very interested in gambling. They like to go to casinos. And I'm wondering if there is a money laundering aspect of, the gold and silver coin dealers. Because they go to Las Vegas a lot. They go to the Indian casinos a lot. Interesting. So, class, for your own research, when you meet coin dealers, why don't you, at the right time, say, so, you know of any good casinos? See what they say. And see if what I figured out is actually true or not. Wow. And so I looked up that property that I bought in 1980 or 1981. That very property for $27,000. And I was wondering, so what's it worth today? It's worth $33,000, 40 years later. But I looked at it, and there are some pictures of the inside of it. It was destroyed, absolutely destroyed. It is now the combat zone. Trash everywhere, broken windows. The row house was empty. I looked at the kitchen cabinets that I put in. Really nice kitchen cabinets, new floor, new roof, new windows, new doors. Sheetrock all over. Destroyed. Absolutely destroyed. Boarded up windows next door, broken windows next door. I mean, the whole row, the whole block is a blight. And I have a feeling that it's not the only block that's a blight. I think there are blocks and it's not like I said, what's the worst property I can invest in? What would that be? It's not like that. It was nice 40 years ago. It was working class. Now it's the combat zone. As a matter of fact, I think that's a two-gun neighborhood in case your first gun misfires. That's how bad it is.
That's pretty amazing. And by the way, that $1 million 2-bedroom row house in Melbourne is not going to be a fixed-up $1 million row house in Melbourne. That's going to be the fixer-upper.
Well, that's what this thing is.
If you want to check this, Vincent, there's a website you can go to. It's realestate.com.au.
Okay.
And if you go there and you type in the stats for 2-bedroom terrace house, Carlton, Fitzroy, let's say just Fitzroy, Fitzroy. And you could check that for yourself. And it's absolutely gobsmacking because it's such a bubble and everybody's waiting for the bubble to pop. And the Herald Sun flat out last week just came out and said, bubble's not going to pop because it's being held up by money laundering money from international and national criminal cartels. And Melbourne has always had a reputation for being the place to go to get nice, clean money. Even, like I said, you could go back 100 years. And that was the case back then. And it's jaw-dropping. Yeah. But,
well, I'm looking at it right now. There's and these are row houses, exactly as you said. There's an address on Charles Street. By the way, this row house isn't much different from the row house that I bought in 1980 or 1981 for $27,000. It really isn't. It's 2-story. It's brick on the front. It's brick on the sides, and it adjoins another house. Here, it would be called a semi-detached, meaning one building divided down the middle, and the left half and a right half, and each person would own, or each family would own half. Well, yeah. And one half might be painted blue, the other half might be painted green. I mean, that kind of a thing. Well, this thing has graffiti all over the side. I'm talking about in Fitzroy, exactly where you said I should look. Okay, graffiti. Even all the first story is graffiti. Anything that can be reached with, one guy with a spray can on another guy's shoulders, as high as they could reach doing that. And then it looks like they got a ladder and went up to the second story. Graffiti on the side of the building, on the roadside of this row house. 1,000,001 to 1,200,000 for this graffiti-laden house. Exactly what you're talking about. Unbelievable. Yeah. Unbelievable.
Yeah. Jaw-dropping. And you really
I'm looking at...
And that would be in Fitzroy, right?
Yes, that's where I'm looking. I'm looking at another house.
Fitzroy is not a good area. Fitzroy is where my husband had his mission on Napier Street in Fitzroy. And he had his mission, and he had the Hells Angels motorcycle club for his next-door neighbour. That's the sort of area that Fitzroy is. The Hells Angels live down the road.
I'm looking at a house in that same area. Well, this is actually Collingwood, Colling Wood.
That's right.
And this house has one window in the front and one front door. Now, the reason I'm mentioning one window and one front door, the window width combined with the front door width occupies 1/2 of the width of the entire house. Okay?
Yeah.
So if you had 2 front doors and 2 windows, that would be the entire width of this house. Now, this is not a brick house. This is a frame house, and it looks like, if I were to categorize the architecture, I would say this looks like something in the Midwest from the 1890s that would be called a depression house. Absolute depression. Okay, nothing special about this house. Asking price $871,500.
Yeah. And these are not good areas. They're inner city, and I suppose you would say they've been gentrified, but they have got a history of being working class areas, which means you buy one of these, and the rats don't care that their house is now worth $871,000. They've had their rat warren running through that row of houses for the last 100 years. They ain't going anywhere. That is the truth of it. And, These houses, they've got tiny, tiny backyards. They might have 100 or 200 square foot backyards. And if you're lucky, you might have a fruit tree in the backyard. I used to live in one of these houses with Archie when we were first together as a couple. And they are, when you are in that house and when you have somewhere to live and other people don't have anywhere to live, you consider yourself really, really lucky. But in reality, it's not a good place to live. Everybody's so on top of each other. And if the guy next door is a pedophile, and if you've got children, small children, those children have got nowhere to go. They've got nowhere to play. And, you can't send them down to the park, down the end of the road, because the whole place is full of people who are just one paycheck away from getting booted out, because the rents are so high, and they all consider themselves to be so lucky to have this shoebox to live in. And I've been there, and I would not go back there for anything, And, this is...
I'm looking...
Oh, sorry.
I'm looking at a cleaned-up version. Now, we're not talking about any shutters in the front. We're talking about a brick row house. We're talking about, it looks like 13 feet wide in Australia, the area you're talking about. It's got a balcony on the second story, just 2 windows on the top story, 1 window on the bottom story with a front door. And this is a tiny place. It's a row house. I'm thinking 13 feet wide, kind of like the place I bought for $27,000 in Australia, in Carlton, Carlton.
Yep, that's right.
$2,300,000. $2,300,000. Looks like it's in a slightly better neighborhood. I can't believe it. How can anybody afford this? How much money do you have to make to live in this? We'll be right back. Guineith Isaacs is with us, and she's explaining to us why people are in despair. I'm looking at this house. It's a row house, and it's the same darn house that I paid $27,000 for. That's worth $33,000 today. I bought it in 1980 or 81, and today it's worth just a little bit more, $33,000. And the description of this house I'm looking at on the internet says classical grace, contemporary elegance, a renovation of distinction. That's the description of this 13-foot wide row house is in Australia. Guineith, $2,300,000.
Yep.
For this row house.
That's right.
It costs twice as much to not have graffiti. That's what I'm looking at.
Yeah. Yeah.
The one with graffiti was only $1 million.
That side wall, it would be in the same state 1 month later, probably the next day, actually. Yeah, they'll just redo it all over again. But I'll tell you what, there are other accommodation options in Melbourne, okay? You can move out to the suburbs. You can move out to somewhere like, I don't know, Heidelberg or Chermside Park, okay? And you can actually get a much cheaper house with a nice suburban block. But you have to commute like about an hour or 90 minutes to go into work. And you have to deal with Sudanese gangs carjacking your car out of the driveway. And you can't, you have to deal with the fact that if you call the police, they're not going to do anything about it. And you're going to have to deal with the fact that if you want to go to the shopping mall, that you're going to be running a gauntlet with your own life, going from the supermarket to your car space, because there's might be a Maori gang or a Sudanese gang or a Muslim gang waiting in the shadows to pounce on you and take your purse and bash you up and maybe rape you.
Gwyneth, what kind
That's
of
jaw-dropping, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely is.
A suburban mall. This
Absolutely
is. In Melbourne, it's happening all the time, and you can search on the internet. You can see this.
Gwyneth, what? Okay, so this maybe some family lives in this 13-foot wide, $2 million. Actually, if you got it for $2 million, you'd be getting it at a discount. This house, this row house. What would that person do for a living? Would this be like a bank president? I mean, what are we talking about?
Probably a CBD worker, which means
what does that mean?
They have an office job in the city.
Uh-huh. Oh, Central Business District.
In the Central Business District, because Carlton and Collingwood and Fitzroy, they used to be where the working class people lived, but these days the working class people, of course, can't afford these real estate prices. So most of them have moved out to the third accommodation area, which I'm going to describe in a moment. And so mostly these, because you see, these places are all only about 20 minutes or half an hour's commute from the Central Business District. Okay, and if you were really keen, you could probably jog there or ride your bicycle there. And but even if you had to catch a tram, it's probably only about a half-hour tram ride into the city. But it's these would be bank workers, these would be government workers, major corporation workers, and they are getting, from what I've heard, they are getting paychecks of in excess of $100 an hour. Your average office worker on a contract. Did you see? They've got no security of tenure. They're all on contracts, and the contracts might be for 12, 24, or 36 months. And then they've got to prove their worth, which in a way is a good thing. But in another way, banks need a bit more than that before they're going to issue you with a mortgage. You know, if you go for a mortgage, even if you're on by $100 an hour starters, the bank is going to have to be pretty well assured that you have got some tenure before they're going to give you a mortgage. But this is who lives in these places. It's crazy, isn't it?
Gwyneth.
Absolutely insane.
Gwyneth.
And then
$100 an hour.
A third group of people.
Just hang on for a second. $100 an hour, 40 hours a week is $4,000 a week. 52 weeks, that's $208,000 a year. For an office worker?
For a major,
we're not talking about a surgeon now.
Office worker on contract.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
That's how it is.
All right. We're going to talk more about this.
A $2 million mortgage.
Yeah. And you can make all this money and be absolutely flat out broke and living in a shoebox. We'll be right back. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. I'm speechless. Guineith and I have been talking about land prices, building prices in Australia. Guineith, I looked up the cost of farmland in Australia. I am stunned.
Yep.
Stunned. In 2017, if you use acres as the measurement, 1 acre of land in Australia, farmland, is almost $8,000. Mm-hmm. It's way more than twice the price of land in the United States. It's more than 6 times the cost of land where our farm is. 6 times.
Yep.
Unbelievable.
But I'll tell you what, it depends. It depends.
How can anybody?
Yeah, It depends on the land and it depends on where it is. Around here, there is a farm adjacent to our farm, actually. It's for sale at the moment. It's 517 or thereabouts acres. They want $500,000 for it. And if I had $500,000 lying around, I'd buy it. It's a really nice farm.
Well, that's roughly $1,000 per acre.
Yeah, and that is around about what you pay for farmland here, but it's pretty pathetic land. And you've got to put a great deal of effort into building it up. And, you know, if you're interested in doing that and maintaining the fertility of the soil is an uphill battle. You know, you've really got to know what you're doing as a farmer because it's granite soil. And granite soil makes about the worst pasture ever, you know. It's like it's got two modes of being rock and concrete. So rock concrete is one mode, and the other mode is bog, okay? And you get rain here for maybe 5 or 6 months of the year, and the other 6 or 7 months of the year is a drought every single year. And that means you might not get any rain at all for 5 or 6 months of the year. And about 1 in every 3 years is a worse than normal drought where you might get maybe a foot of rain. That's 12 inches or less. And about once every 3 years on the other end of the scale, there's an absolutely flooding deluge where you might get foot of rain within a week. So it's a land of extremes, and I'll tell you what, eucalyptus trees grow really, really well here. And if you know what you're doing, you can make money, but there's a reason why the land here is $1,000 an acre, and most of the farmers who live around here are broke. So, and the only reason they're on their land at all is because they inherited it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds like my neighborhood. Guineith, how many, if you were to estimate, how many acres would it take to support one cow in your neck of the woods?
Oh, well, I own 20 acres of land here, and I would struggle to feed one cow.
Okay.
Yeah.
In Missouri where we are, it typically takes between 2 and 3 acres per cow.
Yeah.
So our farm actually is, because we manage it better than other farms, because we're very careful with what we do and we don't overgraze and we let the grass recover, we can probably get 1 cow on 2 acres.
Yeah.
But that's really good. That's really, really good for our neck of the woods. So, class, if you were thinking, if you have an acre, you can have like 10 cows, the answer is no.
No, you can't do that. Yeah. But there's not many cow farmers around here. Mostly it's sheep farmers. But they generally have thousands and thousands and dozens and thousands of acres of land, and they might only have 500 or 1,000 sheep. So they might have 1 sheep to every 5 acres. That's a sheep.
Wow. Not much to eat.
That's how pathetic the country is here. This is Australia, and Australia as a continent has the worst farmland in the whole world. Yeah.
So how can they justify so much money for these row houses? How does this happen? I'm just stunned. I can't imagine somebody coming over to our farm and saying, "I'll tell you what, we're glad to help you. Okay, how much would you like me to pay you? Oh, $100 an hour. I'd show them the highway really quickly. It's an enormous amount of money.
It is. Like I say, apparently a lot of it is money laundering money, but as well as that, the banks have been lending at an absolutely ridiculous rate, and they are basically just rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, as the saying goes. They know that it can't last. It has to go down because even if some of the money does come from the underworld, there is a lot of mortgage debt out there on these $1 and $2 million houses. And you'll notice that not all of these houses are two-story places. There's a lot of single-story row houses out there, and they are tiny. They literally are shoe boxes, you know. And like I say, it's just gobsmacking. There is another option if you want to live in Melbourne, okay, and you don't want to live in the middle class suburbs, and have to put bollards in your driveway, to stop your car from getting robbed out of your own driveway. But you don't have to worry about getting robbed every time you go to the supermarket or whatever at the shopping mall. You can live in a suburb and actually get a reasonable block of land with a nice little suburban house on it in a suburb such as if you type into realestate.com.au Ferntree Gully. That's FERNTREE Gully. And you'll see that the real estate prices are a lot more reasonable. If you just want to quickly do that.
Yeah.
And
I'm doing that. I'm doing that right. I'm doing that right now.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Half the price.
You'll be amazed by the price difference.
Half the price. In Ferntree Gully, you can get a house that might be considered in the United States to be a Victorian house, something around the 1890s in construction date, for $500,000, which is still an enormous amount of money.
Still an enormous amount of money, but guess what? Ferntree Gully is a 2-hour commute into the city. Is that jaw-dropping or what? That's amazing, isn't it? Oh, and not only that, they don't tell you that the whole suburb has a reputation for meth labs and for being my son would call it a bit of a yee-yee area, except he says it's like yee, which means like redneck. It has a reputation.
I'm looking.
In Australia, we would call them bogans. It's a bogan.
I'm looking at a house. I'm looking at a house with a very low-pitched roof, like, it's not even 412. It might be like 212 or 312. A very almost flat roof. $730,000 for a relatively new house, maybe 20 years old. Yeah.
But it's a redneck area. It has a reputation for people who grow interesting herbs, let's just say, in their back gardens, and meth labs, and people who want to, decorate their front yard with bashed-up General Motors vehicles.
Well, it really, okay, I would have to say it looks like a redneck area or a hillbilly area. That's what we would call it in the United States.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at something that looks like a converted mobile home with a deck here and a deck there added on.
Yeah.
Looks like the owner designed it himself, had no architectural design knowledge at all, did it all by himself, and it looks like it, $715,000.
Was that how much?
$715,000.
You've got to be kidding me.
No.
redneck trailer property, basically.
That's right.
What we call in the US.
Yeah.
Like he moved a trailer home onto his property and just decided to build around it.
Yeah. Yeah, the centerpiece would be the trailer. And let's put a little pressure-treated deck on the side. Oh, let's put a little tiny one on the front. Yeah. That's what this is. And there's no, in terms of style. Right. In terms of style, it's absent of any style. It's absent of any architectural standards. It's absent of, boy, that's nice. You can't say that about a single one of these.
It's a redneck special. Yep. And
that's a great way to put it.
It's in a redneck special area, and guess what? It is. The whole suburb is a redneck suburb. It's had a reputation of being that as long as I've been in Australia. Yeah.
So, Guineith, are you thinking about moving?
No.
This is crazy.
I'd be crazy too. You know, out here, you know, I own my own home. It's a 20-acre farm. It has a house on it, which is an older house. It's a mud brick house, but the roof doesn't leak. And I live off the grid, so I have no bills, and the house is paid for. And I've fought the council already on the property tax issue, and they've dug themselves into a hole on that matter. And the matters are a stalemate, and they can't move forward. Because they had they tried to issue me with a court order, but the judge's name that they had on the court order didn't even exist, which meant that it was a fraudulent court order. So how's that, Vincent?
Good for you.
You can't win against these people because they're in the wrong.
We'll be right back. Guineith, you want to talk about some video games? You want to move over to... What are your thoughts about video games? Yeah. Okay.
There's some really, really interesting video games at the moment, okay? And some of them have received quite a bit of attention online and others of them haven't. But there's something going on with the video games, Vincent, and I'll tell you what it is, okay? The first one was issued, first of all, back in about 1986, and it began its life as a role-playing board game, okay? And that was Cyberpunk 2020 was the name of this board game that they're going to reissue it next year. April of next year is the release date. They're going to reboot this board game as a computer game. And the computer game is going to be called Cyberpunk 2070. Okay, and it's to commemorate the fact that that we are actually in 2020, and this is sort of like the next jump down the road for this particular game. And apparently there are people out there who gather and they play these board games, something like along the Dungeons and Dragons type genre of games. So, in other words, this is not Snakes and Ladders, and it's not Monopoly. Basically, you build a character, and he has particular traits, and then you play this character in the game. So it's probably a lot more like Second Life, or one of these first-person shooter role-playing video games rather than a standard board game. But they've adjusted to the 21st century. They're going to put this one out on, in a computer format. And the thing about this game is, okay, if you go back to the rules of the game that was issued in 1986, it was Cyberpunk 2020. And you can go and you can look up the rule book online. So if you've got Cyberpunk 2020 rule book online, you can go and look it up. But the bit that's of interest to me is what they said, what the year 2020 was going to be like. Okay? it says in the rule book that this era of 2020, everybody is divided into their own little groups, and that the people who were running the show were pitting group against group. So it's what Rich Scheben would call group identity politics. They actually predicted in 1986 that in the year 2020 that the whole society would be split apart by group identity politics and every sort of weirdness under the sun. That, you know, if you had, you know, some difference from some other group, that made you extra special, and that gave you what Rich Shealy would call group pity points. That actually this game, which was back in 1986, predicted it back in 1986 that this board game was put out. That that's exactly what society would be like in the year 2020. And I'm going like, what the heck is going on here? You know, these people who put these games together, they're obviously not just getting in their basements and just writing this out all on their own. Something is guiding them, or they are guiding whatever the process is, okay? And the rule book for Cyberpunk 2070 has yet to come out, as far as I know. But when it does, I would be very, very interested to see what it is predicting. Because basically, like I say, the 2020 rule book is basically a cross between what Rich Scheben is predicting and what I'm predicting is the emergence of a Mad Max world. And I think that it's, you know, and that's exactly what the Cyberpunk game is saying. And I think we're heading into a break again.
Yep, hold that thought. We'll be right back. Guineith, if one has a chat with someone who was just recently released from the military, and their contract is up, and you say, so what you guys used to do, you know, in your downtime? Well, we worked out, played video games.
Call of Duty. Probably that's
played video games.
Yeah,
they played video games. And if you look at what happened with video games, they started around the 1980s when computers had enough horsepower in order to run the graphics. And they were these shoot-'em-up type games. There was tank warfare. I think it was, I think it was Atari's Battlezone was one of the first.
Actually funded by the U.S. Department of Defense to be training tools for the U.S. military. That's where they originated from. And all of the big ones like Halo and Call of Duty and all the rest of them, they all started out that way. But I'll tell you what, Vincent, what I'm about to say to you is absolutely going to blow your mind, because there is a game out there and it's called Assassin's Creed, okay? And the plot, the storyline of Assassin's Creed is that basically you are this Black Ops assassin, okay, and you have been specially selected to be involved in a government program, and you are there against your will. You are trapped in a Black Ops facility, and you're generally quite well treated in this facility, but you are required to go inside a machine, and what they do is they jack into your DNA when you are in this machine, and you go back into one of your past lives as an assassin, and you have targets that you have to go and get, and you have missions that you have to go and accomplish in your past life of being an assassin. And you might go back to the days of the Knights Templar, or you might go back to the, War of Independence, or the English Civil War, or any of these places. But generally, the objective of the game, in the end, is that you have a prime target. And to win the game, you have to kill the prime target. Okay? And to be perfectly honest, Assassin's Creed 1 and 2, I forget what the prime targets were. Okay? But I know who the prime target was in Assassin's Creed 3. And you'll never guess who it is. It's Dr. Elliotson. Does that name ring a bell, Vincent?
Share with us who Dr. Elliotson is.
Elliotson was Dr. Norm Shealy in a past life. Have I just blown your mind? Is that gobsmacking?
Absolutely.
Or what? And guess who?
Does Norm know about this?
I don't know.
Does Norm know about this?
I can tell you this is true. I don't know. Probably not. But you'll never guess who the prime target is in Assassin's Creed 4, Black Flag. Bartholomew Roberts.
Wow.
I'm kind of spinning because that is my Archie in a past life. So when you get two people so closely connected in the same circle of association in this life, and then they get a series of video games where in one of the games they target so that everybody who plays that game, their main objective in that game is to kill Dr. Elliotson. And in the very next episode of that video game, their main objective is to kill Bartholomew Roberts, the Pirate King. How's that?
How do you know?
Of people. What was that?
How do you know the relationship between Dr. Norm Shealy and Dr. John Elliotson?
He's mentioned it at some time, either on your show or on another show. And if Dr. Norm Shealy is listening, he would be able to call in and confirm it.
I'll ask him.
If you look up online, Norm Shealy, Dr. Elliotson, you will see that what I'm saying is true. So if you just quickly type in Norm Shealy, Dr. Elliotson, and you'll see that he's actually said it a number of times over the years that he is the reincarnation of Dr. Elliotson. And I'm just going, oh my God.
Yes, yep, you're absolutely right.
And and that I was there, in my past life, I was there alongside Bartholomew Roberts. I was his lover. And it's sort of like that they couldn't, nobody would know who George Wilson was unless they were a student of piracy, of the golden age of piracy. And in that circle, everybody knows me. Everybody knows George Wilson. They all know that that's the lover of Bartholomew Roberts in golden age scholar piracy circles. Or, and if they don't believe it's his lover, they know that it's his really, really, really good friend. But it's real, and I'm saying, because you see this whole thing of putting people into government facilities, checking into their DNA, and then making them go back into their past lives, that's getting pretty close to Project Monarch territory, actually. That it would not surprise me 1 ounce to actually learn that there was actually a government project which had that format. Because I've heard of weirder things that have actually turned out to be true. But the fact is that they are targeting, with these games, Norm Shealy and myself, indirectly through Roberts, but like I say, they had to have Roberts there to actually, because like I say, nobody knows who George Wilson was. But it's the energy, and I was saying, is this just all coincidence? But the older I get, So there's a part of me which is inclined to just go, nah, But the older I get, the less inclined I am to believe in coincidence. And the thing is that Norm Shealy and I have both suffered amazing attacks. We've both got a really big set of bad karma there, which we have to deal with, because Dr. Elliotson was not a particularly nice guy, and neither was George Wilson, actually. Neither, Roberts, he wasn't the nastiest of the Caribbean pirates, but he was no angel either. We're all dealing with a really bad set of karma, trying to make things right. And then there's these games come out which basically, put a target psychically on our backs, So I was just thinking, what on earth is going on here? Does that make sense? I know it doesn't make sense. I'm just saying, well, what's going on? I know that these people who make these video games have made a lot of video games, and also, board game type role play games that heavily predictive. There's another one out there called the Illuminati game, which is quite famous. You get cards, and they describe the World Trade Center bombing, and they describe all sorts of things, massive plagues, and the Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton crime fiasco, and all of this sort of thing, years and years and years before any of it ever happened. But I'm saying, what's going on here with the games?
You mentioned Project Monarch, and then it traces back to the Nazis. Would you care to tell us a little bit more about Project Monarch?
Okay. Basically, they would get children, and they would select them because of their genetics. They tended to be blonde-haired and blue-eyed, and they would conduct experiments on them, and they would basically torture them, and mentally, physically, sexually, whatever other way you could think of, in an effort to get them to release special abilities. And sometimes these abilities would manifest in a quite extraordinary way. And there's very few children from the Project Monarch that have ever survived towards adulthood. There are a few out there in the universe, but there's even fewer of them that are actually mentally balanced. Most of the graduates of Project Monarch that graduate and become adults and are not killed as a part of the process, most of them grow up to be mentally deranged and assassins, multiple personality disorders, and such like. And one of the only ones that I know of who was involved with Project Monarch, who's anything like a sane person, is a fellow by the name of Stuart Swerdlow. And he's got a remarkable story to tell if you ever come across him. One of his best friends is a fellow by the name of Preston Nichols. Okay, and Preston Nichols was a antenna engineer, of all things. And if anyone wants to read Preston Nichols and Stuart Swerdlow's story, they can go online and just type in Preston Nichols, that's Nichols, and Stuart, that's Swerdlow, and you'll read their story. I could be here for about 6 hours telling you a story. It's too much to fit into the time that we have. But basically, they managed to open a portal, and they managed to have some sort of a breach in the space-time continuum. And it had to do as well as that with the Philadelphia experiment. And basically that they were able to, get some people from that particular ship that was involved in the Philadelphia experiment. And all of this, it's too much, it's too complex to say at this time. But this is the sort of territory that we're getting into, and to say that, that the government is operating a program where they're getting people who were assassins in their past lives and putting them into government labs and testing their DNA, and messing with them and getting them to go back into their past lives and go do more black operations 300 years ago, that's that sort of territory. And I'm thinking, wow, that's actually, if what Nichols and Swerdlow was saying was true, which I think it probably might have been.
Very sobering discussion with Guineith Isaacs live in Australia. Guineith, I knew a man by the name of Al Bielek. His spelling of his last name, B-I-E-L-E-K. B-I-E-L-E-K. You can look it up on the internet class. And Al Bielek and Mrs. Finelli and I were talking about the Philadelphia experiment. Al Bielek said he was there. He was one of the few survivors, as you mentioned.
Wow.
And this was an experiment.
He would know. In that case, he may know Preston Nichols and Stuart Swerdlow.
That's probably the case.
Them.
However, Al Bielek died he was 84 years old when he died in 2011, so I can't ask him. But I did try to look him up years ago to see if I could get him on the air with us and talk about it, because when I met him, it was in the 1990s. And it was a riveting discussion. It was just Mrs. Finelli, Al Bielek, me, and our children were there. And just us, just the Finellis and Al Bielek. And we spent, on that particular topic, about a half hour. And he was absolutely dead serious that this happened, that Albert Einstein, Robert Van Neumann, and other scientists were involved. Nikola Tesla's theories were used and the plan was to make the USS Eldridge, a naval ship, disappear from radar so that our enemies in World War II could not see it with radar. And there was an accident. And using a Tesla coil and a couple diesel generators below deck to power this Tesla coil, there was an accident, and a space-time accident, and men were fused.
They ended up in 1984.
They were fused into the deck of the ship.
Yeah, they were.
They were literally, melded, if you will.
In 1984, Preston Nichols had built what he called an antenna, okay? He was busy working for the U.S. government at a place called Monarch, which is just outside of New York. And he was building this so-called antenna for them at Monarch. He was an antenna engineer, and he switched it on, and this portal opened. And there was this ship in the portal, and there were people, apparently some people fell out of the ship fell into the portal and ended up in 1984. Okay? And they saw what the world was like in 1984.
Back in 1943.
And then they went back to 1943 and told the U.S. government about it. And I'm suspecting that Al Bielek was one of the guys who was in 1984 and then went back to 1943 and told the U.S. government about what he had seen in 1984, and it was accurate.
Well, Guineith, I've got to tell you, do you ever remember?
Haven't I?
Well, Guineith, you and I have never talked about this.
No.
Like this. Okay?
No.
Well, Al Bielek told us about the Montauk Project, exactly what you're talking about.
I've
he
never
told me.
talked to you about that.
No, but Al Bielek, you're right. Al Bielek told me in person back in the late 1990s about the Philadelphia experiment in 1943 because we had to make our ships invisible because our ships were being sunk, and the U.S. Navy wanted to make them invisible so that fewer of them would be sunk in the ocean. And so they got, and he mentioned Robert Van Neumann. He did not mention Preston Nichols, as I remember. He might have, but I don't remember that. But he did talk about Montauk, and then he talked about MK Ultra, and he talked about the space-time hole that this accident created. He talked about these things. And I've got to tell you, at that time, I didn't know as much as I did. So he was speaking very, very quickly. And did I understand it, all of it? No, I didn't. I didn't. But yeah. I surely wish I could have that same chat with him today, because I'd have a whole bunch of questions.
Well, this is what concerns me about these video games, is I know that these people have a rule and that they have to tell you what they're doing before they do it. And when I see Assassin's Creed, and when I see them sending people's souls back into the past, and I know that you can send a soul back into its previous incarnation, okay, for that soul to do work in that previous incarnation, because I've done it. I've done it many times with my own soul, gone back to my previous incarnation, sometimes just for a look around, sometimes just to have fun, but sometimes because I've got work to do.
Gwyneth, we're out of time. We're out of time. I'm so sorry to say it.
We'll have to spend a whole show on this at some stage, Vincent.
Let's do it. Yeah. Thank you, Gwyneth.